From agonizing devices that pushed the boundaries of human endurance to sadistic methods that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls prepared to be horrified by the sheer brutality of the Middle Ages, let's talk about the most heinous medieval torture tactics and equipment that mankind has used to do the most brutal things to each other. Saw torture. This type of execution involves sawing a living person in half through the middle of the body, either longitudinally or transversively. The person was either sawed in half transversively or longitudinally to accomplish this. Flaying. Since the time of the ancient Assyrians, flailing has been used as a kind of torture. It is also shown as the way used to execute St. Bartholomew. The method entails skinning the person while they're still alive, an awful demise. Pair of anguish. In the Middle Ages, ladies who were suspected of causing miscarriage were tortured with this horrible device. Additionally, it was applied to punish blasphemers, homosexuals and liars. The device, also known as the choke pair, was placed into one of the prisoner's orifices: the vagina for females, the anus for homosexuals and the mouth for liars and blasphemers. The apparatus included 4 metal leaves that the tormentor could slowly pull apart by turning the top screw. It might be stretched to its maximum size to mutilate the victim or used to rip the flesh. It rarely resulted in death, but additional forms of torture were frequently utilized thereafter. The breaking wheel. The victim is bound to the breaking wheel, which is a wagon wheel with teeth or cogs so that their limbs lay between the cogs. After that, the torturer uses a hammer to bash the victim's limbs over the wheel until they're dead. The wheel would be raised on a shaft for all to see once the victim had passed away. Alternatively, the victim can have their feet chained to the ground and be fastened to the outside of the wheel. The victim's body would then be turned on a circular version of the rack until it broke. Rat torture. It's hard to see how anyone could have come up with rat torture given how horrible it is. The victim is first tied to a rack or table. A rat is then placed on their chest after that. A bucket is placed over the rat and then fastened so the rat cannot get out. The bucket is then covered with a fire. The rat starts to fear and attempts to flee. It cannot penetrate the steel bucket, thus, with no rats in sight or boots for you to try on, our crime and punishment event during half term is much more family friendly. We might show you a thumb screw, but nobody will be using it. The rack. The rack was a staple of the Spanish Inquisition's torture techniques. The victim is fastened to a wooden framework using a cranking device. The victim's limbs are stretched while the ropes holding him or her are made tighter by turning the cranks. This immediately resulted in excruciating pain. The knee splitter. This device, which was widely used during the Inquisition, was made of 2 spiked wood blocks that were positioned in front and behind the knee. The knee would be destroyed by turning the blocks, which were attached by 2 sizable screws, so that they closed in on one another. The method would make the knees ineffective. The block spike count range from 3 to 10, frequently depending on the crime's circumstances and the prisoner's status. The thumb screw. Although perhaps not as deadly as other forms of torture, this is nevertheless excruciatingly uncomfortable. The thumb screw is more of a vice than a screw. A vice mechanism is built into the 2 metal plates into which the victim's thumb is inserted. Next, the vice is tightened. Dunking. The most common method portrayed as being used to torture suspected witches is called dunking, which involves submerging the subject in water before removing them before they drown. Although it may not seem like a big deal, keep in mind that you have no control over when you are pulled out of the water. Before the tormentor drags you back out, you can be on the point of becoming out of air or perhaps drowning. The boot. The boot, sometimes referred to as the Spanish boot or the scarpine, served as a sort of rack for your legs. The lower legs were inserted into a pair of narrow wooden or iron boots. The victim's skin is then forced between the boot and wooden wedges. The wedges are then pushed in with mallets, which resulted in abrasions, lesions and eventually bone fracture. To exacerbate the effect, some versions would additionally include inward pointing, spikes, nails or blades. That's all for the video today. We'll be right back. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye for now.